Hi, I'm Andy from EasyRink. Thanks for joining me for this, the last in a 5-blog series exploring system leadership and issues that affect system leaders. Today I'm going to talk about capabilities, this being a way of anchoring into what are the things we need to do to be effective in achieving the purpose of our work. Last time I talked about the paradox of the faulty test and how it's really easy to be misled by things that look like quality, but when we regard a system as a system, we realise that actually it's a sub-optimization of the whole, even though it looks like an optimization of the parts. So let's explore that a little further. I've been using healthcare as the primary example of talking about systems, in part because it's a system that we've all experienced to some extent, but also because it's quite a complex system that I think demonstrates all of the good and the bad sides of what it means to have to lead a system. Integration is a big thing in healthcare, where we've talked at length for many years in that system about the need to work across boundaries, to work in joined up ways and to bring people together. And there's been enormous amounts of good work done on that, but often that work doesn't clearly distinguish between what I'm calling here mechanisms versus capabilities. So when we look at integration, for example, between district nursing, social care, occupational therapy and physio, a common thing to pursue might be the co-location of different teams from those different functions. Might be looking at how we better coordinate activity across those teams, enhancing communication, streamlining processes, rationalising processes, standardising processes, harmonising terms and conditions, and so on and so forth. All of these things, though, are essentially mechanisms that exist to support better outcomes. They're not really substantive of those outcomes themselves, nor indeed, though, are they substantive of the capabilities that we need to create those outcomes. They may be enablers, but they're not substantive of the things that we're actually going to do to deliver better outcomes. So on the other side of the screen here, we've got capabilities, the things we need to be good at in order to deliver better outcomes, materially different from the mechanisms that might enable them. And they're things like, when we understand the people that we're here to help in the health and care world, do we understand them as people? Do we take a person-shaped understanding? Or do we take a functional understanding where what I see is, the leg and the wound on the leg, but not the life that surrounds it? Are we better at building relationships of trust? Or are we simply conducting assessments that are quite transactional? Are we getting better at solving problems and preventing problems, at making better decisions faster, at meeting needs more reliably, or at building people's strengths? These are the capabilities that we need to build. And the stuff that's in the mechanisms column may have a contribution to helping us build those capabilities, but may be also completely spurious to it. And so when we approach change and we approach system leadership, I think it's really important, in the spirit of the faulty test that I described in my last video, that we distinguish mechanisms from capabilities, we distinguish features from benefits, and that we focus on what are the things we need to be brilliant at in order to achieve good outcomes. Because if we focus on those and work on removing the causes of friction that sub-optimize those, in other words, make it easier to excel in those capabilities, then what we'll do is we'll create a better system. So let me take this example of integration and just explore it a little bit further with you. So here we have, from a real example of where integration was conducted, the teams as they were pre-integration: the social work team, the occupational therapy, the physio and the district nurse team. Each of them shared a similar architecture, where in social work and OT they had what were called referral coordinators who would take requests for help in. They would be put into an allocation process whereby cases were handed out to the teams, and all of that was managed by a functional manager. In physio and district nursing, it wasn't really terribly different. For the physios, they had a secretary instead of a referral coordinator, and for the nurses, they had an answer phone where they would collect the referrals themselves and then allocate amongst the team. When integration happened, though, the push was to move to a world that looked much more like this. So we said, well, we're going to go locality shaped. And these teams exist within localities. And we're going to create a single front end with an integrated referral coordinator that will take requests for help regardless of which service it's for. That will go to a single allocation process, into a single locality team that has all those skills that we need and will be governed by a single locality manager. And on paper that sounds absolutely fantastic, and in practice it's not that it was without merit, but in practice what manifested was something that looked significantly different to what's on screen now. In fact, it looked a lot more like this. Now, to those of you that have paid attention, you'll be able to see that essentially what this looks like is the old system sandwiched between a new front door and a new back end. And in practice, that's really what was going on. So what we had was, yes, we had simplified access to the service from the point of view of there was one phone number to call. But the minute the phone was hung up, what happened was those referrals allocated into separate allocation pots, which were allocated to separate teams, which were managed by separate functional managers, because there was a sense that professional leadership was still important and that we didn't want to lose professional identity. And therefore, sitting across the top of that, we'd actually added another manager rather than removed the bureaucracy of too many. Now, as I said, this was not without merit. A single front door was a genuine advantage. Having a single manager meant there were opportunities for coordination, and having people co-located in a similar office meant that naturally some conversations could happen that would have been more difficult otherwise. Nonetheless, the standard processes of work and the standard focus remained the same. The capabilities that were needed to be person-shaped, to build trust, to be better at solving problems that sat across boundaries, and at preventing those problems, those capabilities didn't really grow, and certainly didn't grow to the extent that had been envisaged. So I think it's reasonable for us to ask whether this was really integration in the sense that was intended at all, or whether it was just a deployment of new mechanisms, but not new capabilities. And for me, this was brought pretty resoundingly home, where when in one of the locality teams, I opened the fridge, and in the fridge, what I found was something akin to this. In the actual real life fridge, I wish I'd taken a photo, but I hadn't. But what I saw was, instead of the numbers, what we had was OT's milk, physio's milk, nurse's milk, social worker's milk. Quite clearly, we weren't integrated when we couldn't even share the milk. So when it comes to leading systems in your area of work, in order to avoid these traps, in order to prevent yourself investing time, energy and focus in growing mechanisms rather than capabilities, you might want to ask questions like these. Do you and your colleagues together have a shared idea of what capabilities you think you need to become better at delivering your purpose, and why? And do you have a clear and shared understanding of what capabilities you already have and what value they bring? Exploring that, I think, can really lead you to productive places in terms of what are we good at, where do we have strengths, and how can we build on those strengths to enhance our sense of purpose. And although I said this was the 5th in a 5-blog series, I've actually decided I'm going to have an additional blog to explore this issue of integration for those that are interested, and to propose a different approach altogether, which I call purposeful design, which I think provides a better starting point and a better frame of reference for improving systems as systems. So I hope you'll return to join me for that, and in the meantime, as always, thanks for watching.